Hi friends, my name is Maruti and I am the co-founder of Cracku. In this video, we'll be looking at the video solutions for CAT 2022 Verbal Slot 2. If you have not attempted these questions, I would recommend you to go to the Cracku previous papers page. You can find the link if you just search for Cracku CAT previous papers and download the PDF of the examination of that particular slot and try to answer the questions on your own. Once you answer the questions, if you want to look at the video solutions, then you can come back and check this video. In fact, when you download the PDF from our site, at the end of every question, there is a button where you click on it, you will be redirected to the video solution. That is, you will be automatically redirected to this page. So you should definitely check that also out. Anyway, this is a very useful video and it will help students who are preparing for CAT. Cracku offers a lot of material completely for free. For example, we offer the complete revision of CAT syllabus for Quant, LRDI and Verbal. All of them are available on YouTube. You should definitely check it out. Those videos are very useful and they help a beginner understand the entire syllabus very thoroughly. In addition to that, we are also offering 3 free mocks. All of them are in the latest pattern of CAT. You should definitely check them out. They even have video solutions and they are taken by thousands of students. So if you want to start your CAT preparation, one of the first things that you should do is take a free CAT mock. In addition to that, like I mentioned earlier, we also have all the CAT previous papers with video solutions completely available for free in a PDF format. You should just Google search Cracku CAT previous papers. You'll go to the site and you can download all the PDF papers and you should try to attempt them on your own. If you like this video, please do subscribe to our channel and please click on the bell icon. In addition to that, if you are having any doubt with respect to any of these questions, please comment below the video. We'll look at every comment and we'll try to respond to it to the best of our ability.
Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. In this particular video, we'll be taking a look at a previous year's CAT reading comprehension passage. It's a scientific passage and a fairly simple passage and the questions are also fairly simple and objective in nature. So let's take a look at the passage. We'll go paragraph by paragraph and then take a look at the questions. Octopuses are misfits in their own extended families. They belong to the mollusca class Cephalopoda, but they don't look like their cousins at all. Other mollusks include sea snails, sea slugs, bivalves. Most are shell invertebrates with a dorsal foot. Cephalopods are all arms and can be as tiny as 1 centimeter and as large as 30 feet. Some of them have brains the size of a walnut, which is large for an invertebrate. So basically what is being discussed over here is that cephalopods, which is essentially octopuses, are quite unlike their cephalopods, which are octopuses, are quite unlike their other cousins, which are essentially mollusks in many ways. So they are unlike other mollusks. Now let's take a look at the next paragraph. It makes sense for these mollusks to have added protection in the form of higher cognition. They don't have a shell covering them and pretty much everything feeds on cephalopods, including humans. But how did cephalopods manage to secure their own invisibility cloak? Cephalopods fire from multiple cylinders to achieve this in varying degrees from species to species. There are 4 main catalysts: chromatophores, iridophores, papillae and leucophores. So essentially what has been discussed is that they don't have a shell and they are easily consumed by a host of predators as such. So they need something to protect them, and the thing that they have to protect them is a form of an invisibility cloak. So invisibility cloak essentially means that they in a way disguise themselves or have a protection mechanism so that they are less visible to predators. That is basically how they protect themselves. So essentially cephalopods need a defense mechanism, and they make themselves invisible using 4 mechanisms. And how they make themselves invisible basically varies from species to species, but they're essentially overall for all cephalopods 4 mechanisms as such. So essentially what has been given till now, they are different from other mollusks, how they defend themselves, how they protect themselves by making themselves invisible. Now let's take a look at the next paragraph. Chromatophores are organs on their bodies that contain pigment sacs which have red, yellow and brown pigment granules. These sacs have a network of radial muscles, meaning muscles arranged in a circle radiating outwards. These are connected to the brain by a nerve. When the cephalopod wants to change color, the brain carries an electrical impulse through the nerve to the muscles that expand outwards, pulling open the sacs to display the colors on the skin. Why these three colors? Because these are the colors the light reflects at the depths that they live in. The rest is absorbed before it reaches those depths. So the mechanism for the working of the chromatophores is given. So the chromatophores are essentially sacs containing pigment granules, and once they are activated by the nerves, when the nerve sends the electrical impulse, they get activated and essentially that color is displayed. So if the octopus wants to appear to be red, that particular color granule is essentially released by the radial muscle, that sac is released, and then its skin appears red essentially. So the mechanism of color changing using chromatophores is given. Now let's take a look at the next paragraph. Well, what about other colors? Cue the iridophores. Think of a second level of skin that has a thin stack of cells. These can reflect light back at different wavelengths. It's using the same properties that we have seen in hologram stickers or rainbows on puddles of oil. You move your head and you see a different color. The sticker isn't doing anything but reflecting light. It's your movement that changes the appearance of the color. This property of holograms, oil and other such surfaces is called iridescence. So essentially an iridescence mechanism is given, which is done by the iridophores as such. So essentially this iridophores, this essential mechanism allows them to have like a hologram effect on their skin. There's another thin layer of skin that they have, which has the iridophores, and that kind of achieves the hologram kind of effect where they look different when you view them from different angles as such. So that is the iridescence effect, which is achieved by iridophores. Again, a masking mechanism for octopuses as such. Now let us take a look at the next paragraph. Papillae are sections of the skin that can be deformed to make a texture bumpy. Even humans possess them, goosebumps, but cannot use them in the manner that cephalopods can. For instance, the use of these cells is how an octopus can wrap itself over a rock and appear jagged, or how a squid or a cuttlefish can imitate the look of a coral reef by growing miniature towers on its skin. It actually matches the texture of the substrate it chooses. So this is the third masking mechanism, which is papillae. So papillae, what does it do? It essentially changes the texture of the skin to match a particular texture, and that essentially helps the octopus mask itself. So if it wraps around a rock, it tries to look like the rock as such. So masking by changing texture. We also have that. Even our skin changes texture in the form of goosebumps, but we can't do it voluntarily. Goosebumps happen involuntarily, but in the case of octopuses, they can voluntarily change the texture of the skin to essentially provide a cover or essentially provide a defense mechanism as such. So papillae work by changing the texture, and that is like the third way of in which a octopus can disguise itself. This kind of like texture changing property is also seen in squid and cuttlefish, but this is a third level of masking that is provided to octopuses so that they can protect themselves. Now let's take a look at the last paragraph. Finally, the leucophores. According to a paper published in Nature, cuttlefish and octopuses possess an additional type of reflector cell called a leucophore. They are cells that scatter full spectrum light so that they appear white in a similar way that a polar bear's fur appears white. Leucophores will also reflect any filtered light shown on them. If the water appears blue at a certain depth, the octopuses and cuttlefish can appear blue. If the water appears green, they appear green, and so on. So basically the mechanism of leucophores is given. This is basically reflecting light so that they blend into the background or whatever the color of the water is at that level. Reflect light to look like the background. So basically 4 mechanisms are mentioned. The point is that, okay, how do cephalopods, that is octopuses, protect themselves? They have a lot of predators, and they are like they don't have a shell, so they need some way of protecting themselves. So basically, how do they protect themselves? They try to become invisible as such. That is, invisibility cloak is they don't actually have an invisibility cloak. They try to appear less visible or invisible to predators by 4 mechanisms as such. Chromatophores, which basically changes the color of their skin. Second is iridophores. Iridophores basically gives an iridescent hologram effect, basically reflecting light so that they look different from different angles. Then you have papillae, which changes the texture of the skin so that the texture can look bumpy, and basically they can mask themselves by looking like rocks, etc. And last is basically the leucophores. The leucophores basically reflect white light, and once they reflect light, they can look like blue water or green water wherever they are. So essentially, they try to be invisible or look like other rocks or something else. They try to look like something else, or they try to look completely invisible so that the predators can't see them and they can't eat them as such. So that is the whole point. How do octopuses protect themselves? They protect themselves by trying to appear less visible to their predators, and how they go about it is given in the passage. So now that we understand the points that are like what is the passage talking about, let's take a look at the questions. So the first question is, based on the passage, it can be inferred that camouflaging techniques in an octopus are most dissimilar to those in sea snails, cuttlefish, polar bears and squids. Cuttlefish is mentioned in we have to find the least dissimilar, most dissimilar. So cuttlefish is actually mentioned at 2 times, saying that, okay, they are like cuttlefish in the fact that they have leucophores, and they are like cuttlefish in the fact that they use papillae. So cuttlefish and octopuses use 2 of the same mechanisms to make themselves to like camouflage themselves. So they are not dissimilar at all. They are fairly similar. So I can directly eliminate cuttlefish. Now second is polar bears. Polar bears are mentioned with leucophores. Polar bears also use the same method as leucophores. These guys reflect blue light, like they reflect white light to appear like blue in blue water and green in green water. Polar bears reflect white light to appear white when they are surrounded by snow. So the camouflaging technique is the same as polar bear in the case of octopuses. So they are similar to polar bear in their use of leucophores as such. So C also can be eliminated. Squids are mentioned in the passage about papillae. Like squids basically grow like growing miniature towers on their skin. So even squids use the papillae technique to mask themselves, to camouflage themselves. So even they are compared to squids as such. Sea snails are other mollusks, and what have we been told about other mollusks and octopus? That the octopus are very dissimilar to other mollusks. They do not have a shell. So sea snails don't actually camouflage themselves. They protect themselves through their shells as such. So they are the most dissimilar to sea snails in terms of camouflaging, because the sea snails camouflaging technique is not mentioned at all. In fact, another method of protecting or defense is given, which is having a shell as such. So sea snails are the only one where no commonality is given and an actual difference is given in terms of defense mechanism. So A would be the right answer. All of the following are reasons for octopuses being misfits except that they are. So the examples or reasons why they are misfits are given over here. They don't look like their cousins at all. They are, the other cousins are basically like the other mollusks have shells. So shells is one of the reason why they are different. They have a dorsal foot while octopuses do not. Cephalopods are all arms. So basically what they don't have and what they have, octopuses have arms, which these guys don't have. They don't have the dorsal foot, they don't have the shells, and can be as tiny as 1 centimeter and as large as 30 feet. Some of them have brains the size of walnut, which is large for an endotrail, so large brains. So these are the differences that are given as compared to their cousins, other mollusks as such. So let's take a look at the options. Are consumed by humans and other animals. This is not given as a point of difference as such. It's been told that they have a lot of everything feeds on cephalopods including humans, but we don't know whether other mollusks also have a lot of predators or not. That information is not shared. So this is not a point of difference, so we can eliminate this as such. We have to find out except that this is they are not misfits because of this reason. Others are given. Do not possess an autoprotective shell. Yes, that is given as a point of difference. Exhibit higher intelligence. Large brain is given. So this is also a point of difference. Has several arms. This is also given a point of difference. So basically what is not given as a point of difference? The fact that they are consumed by humans is not given as a point of difference because we don't know whether other mollusks also have a lot of predators or not. So A is not a point of difference, so that should be the right answer. Which of the following statements is not true about camouflaging ability of cephalopods? Cephalopods can blend into the color of their surroundings. This is true. In blue waters, they look like blue. In green waters, they look like green. When they want to look like red, they will use their chromatophores. They want to look yellow, they will use yellow chromatophores. Brown, they will use brown chromatophores. So A is definitely given, so I can easily eliminate this. Cephalopods can change texture. This is given. They can make their skin bumpy. They can wrap themselves around a rock and make themselves look jagged. So this is also given. They do this using papillae. So this is also mentioned in the passage. Cephalopods can change their color. This is also given. They can change using chromatophores. Using leucophores, they can blend into the color of their surroundings. Like in blue water, they look blue. In green water, they look green. So leucophores over here, papillae over here, chromatophores over here. Cephalopods can take on the color of their predator. Changing to what they see or the color of their predator is not mentioned. What is mentioned is that they can appear to take any of the three colors that are there in their sacs. They can appear to blend into their surroundings, but that they take on the color of their predator is not given at all in the passage. So this is not true according to the passage, at least. This is not mentioned in the passage. So this is option D would be the right answer. Based on the passage, we can infer that all of the following statements, if true, would weaken the camouflaging adeptness of cephalopods, etc. So we have to figure out which would not weaken. So let's take a look at the options. The number of chromatophores in cephalopods is half the number of iridophores and leucophores. But again, we don't know how many are needed. Maybe half the number are sufficient for actually providing the function that is needed. So in this way, this doesn't really say that the function is not carried out properly. So even if the number of chromatophores are half, we can't really say that the camouflaging ability is hampered as such. So I don't think this actually weakens the camouflaging adeptness. So I would say this would be the answer. Let's take a look at options B, C and D as well. The temperature of the water at the depths at which cephalopods reside renders the transmission of neural signals difficult. Now, if this is true, what happens if the neural signal doesn't go? We know that the chromatophores depends on like the electrical impulse sent by the brain from the nerve to the muscles. If the neural signal doesn't go, the brain cannot send the electrical impulse, which means that the chromatophores cannot get triggered or will not get triggered properly, which would mean that their masking or camouflaging ability is definitely hampered. So if B is true, then the chromatophores will not work as expected, and BA definitely would weaken the camouflaging adeptness. So we can eliminate option B. Light reflects the colors red, green and yellow at the depths at which cephalopods reside, but they have sacs of red, yellow and brown. They don't have green pigment, and it has been given that these are the three colors reflected at the depths that they live. So if green color is actually seen at the depths at which cephalopods live, and they don't have that sac of color, then they are going to be very visible because green will be striking against them. They cannot blend into their background as such. So if green color is visible, these guys will not be able to blend into it. So it will definitely hamper their camouflaging ability. So C can also be eliminated. The hydrostatic pressure at the depths at which cephalopods reside renders radial muscle movements difficult. Again, radial muscle movements is needed over here. Okay, we have that they work on a network of radial muscles radiating outwards. The radial muscle essentially triggers the change in color. So if the radial muscle doesn't move, or if its muscle movements are difficult, the chromatophores will definitely not work. So D also hampers the effective functioning of chromatophores. So D will also reduce the camouflaging ability of octopuses. Only A does not really indicate how it would actually weaken the camouflaging ability. So A is the correct answer. Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. I am Sayali Kal. In this particular reading comprehension passage, we have a passage about how engineering should not just look at engineering problems objectively, but also should consider the social implications of what they are trying to build. So let's take a look at the passage. We'll go paragraph by paragraph and then take a look at the questions. When we teach engineering problems now, we ask students to come to a single best solution defined by technical ideals like low cost, speed to build and ability to scale. This way of teaching primes students to believe that their decision making is purely objective, as it is grounded in math and science. This is known as technical social dualism, the idea that technical and social dimensions of engineering problems are readily separable and remain distinct throughout the problem definition and solution process. So essentially what is being described over here, the way we currently teach engineering or how to solve engineering problems is that we should only look at the technical aspects, only look at the mathematical and objective aspects, and we should leave all social aspects out of it, as if those social aspects are essentially extraneous to the technical solution as such. So the current way of solving engineering problems leave out social aspects and this is essentially called as the technical social dualism. Now let's take a look at the next paragraph. Non-technical parameters such as access to a technology, cultural relevancy or potential harms are deemed political and invalid in this way of learning. But those technical ideals are at their core social and political choices determined by a dominant culture focused on economic growth for the most privileged segments of society. By choosing to downplay public welfare as a critical parameter for engineering design, we risk creating a culture of disengagement from societal concerns amongst engineers that is antithetical to the ethical code of engineering. So basically when you say that okay, you should look at the social aspects, you should look at the cultural relevancy, you should look at all of these aspects, they are basically told that no, these aspects are political and they are not within the domain of engineering concern. These are not engineering issues and we should not look at the social aspects of the engineering problems that we are trying to solve, because once we try to do that, we are basically getting involved in politics and you don't want to do that. But the author is arguing that that is not right, because when we don't look at those social aspects, we don't look at the social impact, we are essentially providing solutions that help the dominant culture, that provide solutions for the dominant, like essentially those who are in power as such. They define what the problem is and the solution essentially works for them as such. And you are by disengaging from the social impact, the social aspect of the engineering problem, you are essentially doing a disservice to your own engineering code of ethics as such, what your ethical code of engineering should be. So essentially the author is arguing that by not looking at social aspects of engineering, you are helping dominant culture and dominant class against ethical code of engineering. Now let's take a look at the next paragraph. In my field of medical devices, ignoring social dimensions has real consequences. Most FDA-approved drugs are incorrectly dosed for people assigned female at birth, leading to an unexpected adverse reactions. This is because they have been inadequately represented in clinical trials. So the author says that ignoring the social aspects or ignoring social dimensions of problems has a real impact. If you ignore the social dimensions of medical devices, what happens is that you have solved it using incorrect ideas and incorrect ideals, and basically the result is that you have adverse reactions for a certain section of underrepresented section of society as such. So essentially adverse impact of not considering social dimensions. An example is given. Now let's take a look at the next paragraph. Beyond physical failings, subjective beliefs treated as facts by those in decision-making roles can encode social inequities. For example, spirometers, routinely used devices that measure lung capacity, still have correction factors that automatically assume smaller lung capacity in Black and Asian individuals. These racially based adjustments are derived from research done by eugenicists who thought these racial differences were biologically determined and who considered non-white people as inferior. These machines ignore the influence of social and environmental factors on lung capacity. So essentially the author is saying that many of the times when you're solving for, even when you're solving engineering problems, many of the time what you assume as facts are not facts, they are subjective beliefs. And she gives the example of spirometers. So when you are using spirometers, while you're using the spirometer, they are trying to measure your lung capacity. So when you are measuring lung capacity, there are corrections for specific races of people. Now, where did these corrections come from? So when they are making the spirometer, they assume that these corrections are fact, but they are not facts essentially. Those corrections were made by eugenicists. So eugenicists are a kind of a discredited form of discredited scientists, basically nearly like at the time of like at the height of eugenicism was in Nazi Germany types, where they used to believe that the Aryans were inferior, Aryans were the superior race, the other races were inferior, and they essentially that was a pseudo form of science which essentially believed that different races were inferior, and those guys essentially developed those corrections. Their subjective beliefs developed those corrections, and you're still using them to date. And those essentially you don't like question where those numbers or those corrections came from, and essentially you use things as facts when in fact they are not facts as such. So this example essentially establishes how in many cases engineering problems use facts and rely on things as facts which are actually subjective beliefs as such. So in this would basically these machines ignore the influence of social and environmental factors on lung capacity. So basically for even when you are when people ignore the subjective beliefs, when beyond just like the physical failings, essentially relying on only on engineering, ignoring social factors essentially makes you assume or consider subjective beliefs as facts as such. Subjective beliefs can be confused with facts. And an example of this is given. So essentially what you are saying is that this is objective engineering. It's not objective engineering, because many of the factors or information that is going into your objective model is in fact subjective in nature, is in fact at times can be racist. So you might think that you are doing objective engineering by building the spirometer and using the spirometer to measure lung capacity, but what you don't know is one of the factors or inputs going into the model is a subjective belief of like racist scientists, and which is not based in like proper science as such. So that is what is the point of this paragraph. Now let's take a look at the next paragraph. Many technologies for systematically marginalized people have not been built because they were not deemed important, such as better early diagnostics and treatment for diseases like endometriosis, a disease that afflicts 10% of people with uteruses. And we hardly question whether devices are built sustainably, which has led to a crisis of medical waste and healthcare, accounting for 10% of US greenhouse gas emissions. So essentially, the author is saying that certain medical devices were not built not because they were not needed, but because they were needed by people that were not considered important, or whose needs were not considered important. So essentially medical devices that were needed but not built because they were needed by an underrepresented or a marginalized section of people, but not built because needed by a marginalized section. So essentially women who needed these devices to check for endometriosis did not get those devices in time, because the needs of women who are suffering from endometriosis was not considered important. So even though this medical device is extremely important, it would improve the lives of many women, because the needs of women were not considered important, those medical devices were never made. So again, the author is mentioning how a social factor influenced how engineering actually did things. So the author is essentially debunking this whole idea that engineering is objective, etc. The author is saying by giving several cases how engineering at the moment essentially enforces the dominant culture's view, the dominant culture's needs, and solves for the dominant culture's needs as such. So basically when you say that when you are being objective in engineering, the author is saying no, you're not being objective in engineering, you're ignoring the needs of those who are underrepresented. And also basically in this she also mentions how sustainability was never considered a factor while building medical devices. And the impact of that was that it accounts for like 10% of the greenhouse gases as such. Social justice must be made core to the way engineers are trained. Some universities are working on this. Engineers taught this way will be prepared to think critically about what problems we choose to solve, how we do so responsibly, and how we build teams that challenge our ways of thinking. So basically, the author is giving the solution for this, that you should actually incorporate social justice in the way engineers are trained. And then some universities are doing that, and how those engineers would think in a more fair and balanced way as such. So social justice should be incorporated Individual engineering professors are also working to embed societal needs in their pedagogy. Darshan Karwat at the University of Arizona developed activist engineering to challenge engineers to acknowledge their full moral and social responsibility through practical self-reflection. Khalid Kadir at the University of California, Berkeley created the popular close engineering environment and society that teaches engineers how to engage in place-based knowledge and understanding of the people, context and history to design better technical approaches in collaboration with communities. When we design and build with equity and justice in mind, we craft better solutions that respond to the complexities of entrenched systemic problems. So here she gives other examples of how people are trying to correct for these issues, how they are trying to balance and incorporate social needs into engineering as such. Other positive examples of people incorporating social needs into engineering training as such. Incorporating social needs in engineering education. So the author through the passage is trying to communicate how it is the engineer's role to not just look at a technical problem as only technical problem, but also look at the social aspects of the technical problem. Because when you don't look at it, what you're essentially doing is that you are solving for the needs of the dominant culture, you're solving for the needs of like cost and efficiency without looking at the sustainability, without looking at the impact on the underrepresented majorities. You're considering as fact or what might be a subjective belief. You are not considering the needs whose needs might not be underrepresented in society. So all of these essentially are essential social factors that an engineer should consider because it is in their ethical code of engineering as such. And then she gives positive examples of universities which are trying to correct, professors which are trying to correct and move in a positive direction. So the author is trying to highlight the need for better social justice being incorporated in the education for engineering, social concerns to be part of engineering problem solving as such. That is what she is advocating for through the passage. So now that we understand what is the purpose behind writing this passage, we can answer the questions. So the first question is, we can infer that the author would approve of a more evolved engineering pedagogy that includes all of the following except make considerations of environmental sustainability intrinsic to the development of technological solutions. This is something that she actually mentions. She mentions that we never considered the sustainability of medical devices that we made, and that has led to the catastrophe of production of greenhouse gases. They contribute to 10% of greenhouse gases as such. So this is something that she would definitely want to include. So we can eliminate that. A more responsible approach to technical design and problem solving than focus of speed in developing and bringing it to scale. So she mentions this in first, that when we are finding the best solution, we are thinking of low cost, speed to build, ability to scale. And what do we not consider? Social impact. So she wants a more responsible approach which considers other social objectives rather than just these things as such. So she is going to want to include this in her engineering pedagogy. Design that is based on the needs of communities using local knowledge and responding to local priorities. This is also something that she mentions. She mentions that access to non-technical parameters like access to technology, cultural relevancy, potential harms are considered politically invalid. You don't consider what is needed by the local this as such. All of that is mentioned in the passage as such. So basically the author says that you have to respond to the cultural requirements, the cultural relevance of what you're building, the local requirements as such. So this is something that she would actually accept and approve of in the evolved engineering pedagogy. So we can eliminate this. moving towards technical social dualism where social community needs are incorporated in problem definition and solutions. This part is true, she would agree with this, but this part, moving towards technical social dualism, is wrong. Technical social dualism is an idea she is explicitly against. So what is technical social dualism? It is the idea that the technical and social dimensions of engineering problems are readily separable and remain distinct through the problem definition and solution process. So the idea is that these are two different things, let's not mix them. But she is against that idea. In fact, she believes that social factors should be considered in along with technical factors while developing engineering solutions. So she is against this idea of technical social dualism. So she is not going to say move towards this idea. That is definitely not something that she is going to mention. So this is not something that she would include. So D would be the right answer. All of the following are examples of the negative outcomes of focusing on technical ideals in the medical sphere, except neglect of research and development of medical technologies for the diagnosis and treatment of diseases that typically afflict marginalized communities. This is given in the case of endometriosis of women. Medical devices were never made for that because those needs were never considered important. So this is something that was given as a negative outcome of only focusing on technical ideals, because those technical ideals were driven by the dominant culture, the dominant this, and the dominant needs of the men who were dominating. So their needs were answered. The technical technical field essentially wanted to address the needs of the dominant culture, which is males, and therefore no medical devices were essentially made for women who are suffering from endometriosis. So this is given as an example, so we can eliminate this. All of the following are except this. So this is an example, so we can eliminate it. Option B is continuing calibration of medical devices based on past racial biases that have remained unadjusted for changes. This is based on the example of the spirometer, that what you're relying on as fact are basically racially biased readings of eugenesis. So this is you continue to calibrate lung capacity using those figures that were given by eugenesis. So this is also given as a example in the passage. Exclusion of non-privileged groups in clinical trials, which leads to incorrect drug dosages. This is given for women who are assigned female at birth. They were underrepresented in clinical trials, and because they are underrepresented in clinical trials, their dosage is not correctly determined, leading to more adverse outcomes. This is also given in the passage, so can be eliminated. Incorrect assignment of people as female at birth, which has resulted in faulty drug interventions. No, the assignment of people at female at birth was not the problem. Women who were assigned as female of birth had more adverse outcomes because their dosage was incorrect, because there were not enough people who were assigned female at birth in the clinical trials. The problem was the fact that there was underrepresentation in clinical trials, not that they were incorrectly assigned female at birth. This is incorrect. This is the assignment was correct, okay, the assignment of female at birth was correct, but because they were underrepresented in the clinical trials, they had faulty drug dosages. So this is what is not given as an example. So option D is the right answer. In this passage, the author is making the claim that the objective of best solutions in engineering has shifted the focus of pedagogy from humanism and social obligations to technological perfection. So basically, the author is saying that the focus has not shifted, but it was always on technological perfection as such, that has been always the dominant concern, and social obligations were never a concern as such. So it's not as if the focus has shifted, the pedagogy's focus has shifted from A to B is not true at all. So this is not a claim that the author is making. Engineering students today are taught to focus on objective technical outcomes independent of social dimensions of their work. This is true. The author says that they are told that, okay, this is what you have to focus on. They are primed to believe that decision making is purely objective, grounded in maths and science, that social objectives should not be considered. They are not part of the engineering problem. That is what they are taught, and this is true. This is a claim made in the passage, so I'd say this is the right answer. Engineering students today are trained to be non-subjective in their reasoning, as this best enables them to develop much needed universal solutions. Non-subjective in their reasoning is true, but this is not the reason why, that this best enables them to develop much needed universal solutions. This is not the reason why that they are trained to be objective. They are trained to be objective because they believe that being objective is what a engineer should do. The engineer should not look at social problems, because doing that would be getting involved in politics, and your job as an engineer is not to get involved in politics. That is the reason why they are trained to be objective in their outlook, and not because they want to build best universal solutions. That is not the aim at all. So C is also incorrect. Technical social dualism has emerged as a technique for engineering students to incorporate social considerations into their technical problem solving process. Technical social dualism has emerged, but this is the opposite of actually incorporating social considerations. Technical social dualism is essentially keeping out social considerations, not incorporating. So D is clearly incorrect. It is opposite of what is given in the passage, so can be eliminated. B is the right answer. Let's take a look at the fourth question. The author gives all of the following reasons for why marginalized people are systematically discriminated against in technology-related interventions, except but those technical ideals are at their core social and political choices determined by a dominant culture focused on economic growth for the most privileged segments of the society. So this is basically what the author says, that when you say that, okay, we have to optimize for cost, we have to optimize for speed of building or scalability, you're essentially considering only the needs and concerns of the dominant culture. This has been given a way of essentially discriminating against the marginalized society. So this is true. This is you focus on the needs of the dominant culture and ignore the needs of the marginalized sections of society. So this is one of the examples or reasons that is given. And we hardly question whether devices are built sustainably, which has led to a crisis of medical waste and healthcare, accounting for 10% of US greenhouse gas emissions. Now, this is given as a criticism of how social factors were not considered in engineering development, but this is not about social inequality. This is just about the fact that the methods are not sustainable, and they are not sustainable for everybody, like for the poor, for the rich, for the marginalized, for the dominant. For everybody it is bad. So it's not a way in which the marginalized are affected and the dominant culture is not affected. This is not one of those cases. Here everybody is adversely affected. So this is not an example of why of discrimination as such. So I would say this is the right answer. Here everybody is affected because like greenhouse gases affect everybody. Yes, it's not just like something that is socially unequal. It is not something that is done to discriminate against or that causes discrimination against the marginalized people. So B would be the answer as such. But let's take a look at option C and D as well. These racially based adjustments are derived from research done by eugenicists who thought these racial differences were biologically determined and who consider non-white people as inferior. This was a form, or this was an example given to show how Asians and black people were discriminated against in how their lung capacity was measured by medical devices. So this is a reason that was given to show that marginalized people are systematically discriminated against in technology related interventions. So this is an example given, so we can eliminate it. Beyond physical failings, subjective beliefs treated as facts by those decision-making roles can encode social inequalities. This is given as an example just before this, where the spirometers example is given. So this is also shown how people believe as facts, what people believe as facts might be subjective biases, especially against marginalized communities. So this is also given as a reason why you should, just technology related interventions which do not consider social factors are actually systematically discriminate against marginalized people. So D is also one of the reasons given. B is the only one which is not related to discrimination. It is instead related to sustainability, and that is not related to social inequality or discrimination as such. So B is the right answer.
We at Cracku provide all the previous year CAT papers along with many other MBA examinations such as IIFT, ZAT, SNAP, MAT, CMAT, TIS and PGDBA in the actual exam format. You can attempt them as a test and get a detailed analysis of your performance or download them as PDFs.
Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. I am Sayali Kal. In this particular video, we'll be taking a look at a RC passage which is based on understanding what are institutions. It's a philosophical passage and it's a bit of a heavy passage. Whenever we have heavy passages like this, what I try to do is try to cut every single paragraph into sub-paragraphs so that we write the main point of each sub-paragraph rather than digesting an entire long paragraph on its own. So let's take a look at the passage. We'll go paragraph by paragraph and then take a look at the questions. Okay. We begin with the emergence of philosophy of the social sciences as an arena of thought and as a set of social institutions. The two characterizations overlap but are not congruent. Academic disciplines are social institutions. My view is that institutions are all those social entities that organize action. They link acting individuals into social structures. So basically, how do you think of social sciences? You can think of them as academic disciplines, as arenas of thought, essentially as a thought discipline as such, or you can look at social sciences as institutions, social institutions as such. These are two different definitions of looking at two different ways of looking at social sciences. They overlap, they are not mutually exclusive, but they kind of overlap, but they are not exactly the same also, they are not congruent also. The author believes that academic disciplines are social institutions. He basically feels that what is a social institution? Any way in which people interact together, act together, coordinate together are essentially institutions as such. So essentially two ways of looking at social sciences. Either as arena of thought and institutions. Then the author goes on to tell what he feels are institutions. Definition of institutions. So my view is that institutions are all those social entities that organize action. They link acting individuals into social structures. There are various kinds of institutions. Hegelians and Marxists emphasize universal institutions such as family, rituals, governance, economy, and military. These are mostly institutions that just grew. Perhaps in some imaginary beginning of time, they spontaneously appeared. In their present incarnations, however, they are very much the product of conscious attempts to mold and plan them. So he gives an example of, so he gives the definition of what an institution is, and he says that, okay, there are these universal institutions that have just grown. They maybe have started from some point of time naturally, but right now they are pretty much molded, planned, acted on as such. And universal institutions are given and how they came about and grow. So organic emergence plus inorganic changes to it. Okay. We have family law, established and de-established churches, constitutions and laws, including those governing the economy and the military. Institutions deriving from statute like joint stock companies are formal by contrast with informal ones such as friendships. There are some institutions that come in both informal and formal variants as well as mixed ones. Consider the fact that the stock exchange and the black market are both market institutions, one formal, one not. Consider further that there are many features of the work of the stock exchange that rely on informal, non-codifiable agreements, not least the language used for communication. To be precise, mixtures are the norm. From constitutions at the top to bylaws near the bottom, we are always adding to or tinkering with early institutions. The grown and the design are intertwined. So essentially he goes deeper into what is an institution, and he starts with the institutions of how there are universal institutions like the family, rituals, churches, military, government, and how these have also become, these are organized. They grew up probably at some point of time naturally, but these are also organized. And essentially he says that those that are organized are say formal, those that are not organized or codified are informal, but essentially everything is like a mixture of them. Whatever you can consider as formal also has an informal base. Like for example, the stock market also has an informal base as such, and essentially mixtures are like the most institutions are essentially mixtures as such. So forms of institutions: formal, informal, and mixtures. And how every institution is kind of under constantly being tinkered with as such. Now let's take a look at the next paragraph. It is usual in social thought to treat culture and tradition as different from and although alongside institutions. The view taken here is different. Culture and tradition are subsets of institutions analytically isolated for explanatory or expository purposes. Some social scientists have taken all institutions, even purely local ones, to be entities that satisfy basic human needs under local conditions. Others differed and declared any structure of reciprocal roles and norms as institutions. Most of these differences are differences of emphasis rather than disagreements. Let us straddle all these versions and present institutions very generally as structures that serve to coordinate the actions of individuals. Institutions themselves have no aims or purpose other than those given to them by the actors or used by actors to explain to them. So basically the author says that what is an institution? Some people say that culture and tradition are not part of institutions. Some people believe that they are a subset of this, only needed for they are only separated only for the sake of understanding or explaining them. Some believe that things are not part of institutions. Some believe that anything which has a reciprocal role are institutions. So there are contrasting ways of looking at what is an institution. So the author says let's leave all of these disagreements aside. Let's define institutions very generally. Anything which essentially involves essentially the author wants to say that anything which has serves the role of coordinating actions of individuals, we'll call it as an institution as such. Whether essentially it has no aim or purpose other than what the actors give it. So the author adopts a broad definition of what is an institution. So let us take a look at the last paragraph. Language is the formative institution for social life and for science. Both formal and informal language is involved, naturally grown or designed. Language is all of these to varying degrees. Languages are paradigms of institutions or, from another perspective, nested set of institutions. Syntax, semantics, lexicon and alphabet character sets are all institutions within the larger institutional framework of a written language. Natural languages are typical examples of what Ferguson called the result of human action but not the execution of any human design. Reformed natural languages and artificial languages introduce design into their modification or refinements of natural language. Above all, languages are paradigms of institutional tools that function to coordinate. So essentially what is being discussed over here, the author is saying that language is also an institution. So the author says that they are their nested set of institutions, the grammar rules, everything, etc., are also institutions within the larger framework of linguistics or written language. Natural language is an example of an institution which organically develops, but then later on is when you have artificial languages, they are essentially rules added to the natural language as such. So essentially in this particular paragraph, he discusses how language is also a form of is an institution as such. So through the paragraph, what we see is that the author discusses what is an institution. This I would think is a preface to a idea of where he is trying to explore what are institutions or what are the rules of institutions, how to understand institutions. Before that, you would have to preface all of the discussion by identifying what are institutions. So he begins by saying that okay, in social sciences we try to separate out, okay, this is institution, this is an arena of thought, but essentially he believes that let us take a broader view of what are institutions. Anywhere in which in any way which actually people coordinate or brings people to act together are institutions. He explains the most universal institutions that are there and how most institutions that are there are also part codified, part formal, part informal, part organic, part inorganic. So essentially he is describing what are institutions as such. Then he goes on to how culture and tradition can also be considered as subsets of institutions. He basically says let's adopt a broad definition of what is an institution. He goes on to say, you know what, language is also a form of institutions. So he is essentially trying to answer through this passage what are institutions, what could be, when we try to understand what are institutions, what could be considered as institutions as such. So now that we understand what the author is trying to do through this passage, let us take a look at the questions. Consider the fact that the stock exchange and the black market are both market institutions, one formal and one not. Which of the following statements best explains this quote in the context of the passage? So the author basically says it over here, okay. The author says that we have family law, established and de-established churches. Institutions deriving from statute like joint stock companies are formal by contrast with informal ones such as friendships. There are some institutions that come in both informal and formal variants as well as mixed ones. Consider the fact that stock exchange and the black market are both market institutions, one formal, one not. So essentially what is the author saying? That even in the same sector you have formal as well as informal, and most cases you find a mixture of them. He goes on to say that even in the stock exchange you rely on informal non-codifiable agreements, not least the language used in communication. So essentially he is saying that nothing is purely formal, nothing is purely informal also. The most of the cases you have a mixture of institutions, and essentially institutions both formal and informal exist, and even in the same sector you will find a overlap of them. Everything will be like there can be both formal and informal, and a mixture of things even in the same domain, in the same, if you consider the same type of institutions also, you will have variants, both formal and informal variants in the same area as such. So let us take a look at the options. Market instruments can be formally traded in the stock exchange and informally traded in the black market. The formal and informal are not about how they are traded. Formal and informal are about how that institution is set up. So like a stock market is set up by statute. It is set up by giving or like passing laws. You have a code of conduct. Black market is not set up by passing any laws or passing any statute. It does not have a codified book of laws as such. It essentially operates informally. So it's not, the formal and informal is about the nature of the institution and not how the trading occurs. So this essentially distorts what is given in the paragraph. The reason why it is used there is essentially used to show how there is like the one format of institution is a formal institution, one format of the institution is an informal institution. So it changes that into the way how it is traded and not how the institution is defined in itself. So A is incorrect. The stock exchange and the black market are both organized to function by rules, but that is not what is the point. They have their own rules. One has a formal set of rules, one is formally established, the other has an informal set of rules. It is informally established. The one is codified, it is led by statute, the other is not codified. So this is also missing that. They have rules, but what is the difference? The difference is that this is a formal institution, this is an informal institution. C is the stock exchange and black market are examples of how even within the same domain, different kinds of institution can coexist. That is exactly what the author is trying to say through that particular area. He is trying to say that there are like a spectrum of institutions, formal, informal, a mixture of both, everything is there. Even within the same domain you will find variants of institutions as such. So essentially he's trying to say how it isn't clear cut that okay, this is formal, this is informal, these type of institutions can only be formal, these type of institutions can only be informal. That is not there. So he's trying to make that particular point through this particular example. So only option C catches that how even in the same area you can have two different types of institutions. So C is the right reason. The stock exchange and the black market are both dependent on the market to survive. That is also not given, and that is not the point. The point being made here about is how both formal and informal markets exist in the same area as such. So D also misses that, only C is the right answer. All of the following inferences from the passage are false except as concepts, culture and tradition have no analytical, explanatory and expository power, especially when they are treated in isolation. This is opposite of what is given. He says that you consider them separate from institutions only for expository or analytical reasons. You consider culture separate or tradition separate so that you understand them. You separate them only for understanding as such. It is given clearly. The view taken here is different. Are subsets of institution analytically isolated for explanatory or expository purposes. So the idea that they have no explanatory power or expository power is clearly incorrect. So this is false. So I can eliminate it. I have to essentially find the true inference. So this is a false inference. I can eliminate it. Option B is the institution of friendship cannot be found in the institution of joint stock companies because the first is an informal institution while the second is a formal one. This is again something that the author says, like explicitly says no to. What he says is that one is formal, the other is informal. But even in formal institutions, for example, if you take the case of stock markets, many of the underlying aspects of formal institutions are also informal. So he's definitely not saying that if something is formal, it can have no informal aspect to it. So he'll definitely not, we cannot infer that something which is a formal institution like joint stock companies cannot have anything informal in it like friendship, because stock markets which are formally codified also have an informal base to it. So B also cannot be essentially inferred. So this is also a false inference. Institutions like the family, rituals, governance, economy and the military are natural and cannot be consciously modified. Again, not true, because they are something that essentially they appeared at some point of time naturally, but they are very much product of conscious attempts to mold and plan them. So it's not that they cannot be modified, they are actively being modified, actively being molded. So this is also incorrect, this is a false inference. Natural language refers to the stage of language development where no conscious human intent is evident in the formation of language. This is from the last paragraph where he says, natural languages are typical examples of what Ferguson called the result of human action but not the execution of any human design. So human design is not there, which means that there is no intent, there is no direction. It develops out of human action but not out of human like design or human direction saying, okay, this should be there, this should not be there. So this is true, there is no conscious human intent that is evident at the formation. When conscious human intent enters, it becomes like a part natural, part artificial language as such. So D is the right answer. So D would be the correct answer to choose. In the first paragraph of the passage, what are the two characterizations that are seen as overlapping but not congruent? So we identified it as essentially arena of thought is one one way of looking. The other one is one characterization, the other is institutions. So let us take a look at the options. An arena of thought and academic disciplines. Academic disciplines is essentially arena of thought. Essentially it's like saying that social sciences are basically just about thinking, and the other way of looking at it is they are actually things that affect or manage our lives. It's not basically just all thought and all academic thinking, but it is something that actually affects our life. So the two ways of looking at it as an entirely academic thing. The second way of looking at it as a socially organizing force, and those are the two different characterizations. The arena of thought and academic disciplines are essentially the same thing. They are referring to the same thing, that is looking at social sciences from an entirely academic point of view. So this is incorrect. They are the same thing as such. Individuals and social structures, no. Individuals are not one. Basically, you're looking at the characterization as an academic discipline versus a social institution. So social structures is right, but individuals is incorrect. The philosophy of the social sciences and a set of social institutions. Philosophy of social sciences is characterized into two parts. This is not one of the characterizations. The split is of philosophy of social sciences. So this is incorrect. Academic disciplines and institutions. This is exactly the right way of splitting philosophy of social sciences. These are the two characterizations that are mentioned. Academic disciplines is essentially a stand-in for arena of thought. So D is the right answer. Which of the following statement best represents the essence of the passage? So essentially throughout the passage he is trying to define what are institutions. Says essentially, okay, this is an institution, this is an institution. He tries to adopt a broad perspective or definition of what is an institution, so that he can then maybe talk about what are institutions, the characteristics of them, etc. So let us take a look at the options. It is usual in social thought to treat culture and tradition as different from institutions. This is given in the passage, but it is a fact mentioned. This is not the crux of the passage at all. In fact, the author says that culture and tradition are subsets of institutions. That is the point he is trying to make. This is an unrelated fact mentioned in the passage, which is not the main argument. Language is the fundamental formal institution for social life and for science. No. Language is a formative institution, but fundamental formal institution is definitely not the case. He doesn't say this is fundamental, this is formal, this is informal. In fact, language is not is both formal and informal language as such. So it's not fundamental formal institution at all. So B is also incorrect. And he doesn't talk. His focus is not just on language, his focus is on institutions. What all are institutions? He mentions everything in context of, is this an institution, is this an institution? So the focus is not on language, but rather on institutions. The stock exchange and black market are both market institutions. Like A, this is a fact mentioned, but this is not the crux of the argument. The argument is about what is an institution. C is just a fact mentioned, not at all the focus. Institutions are structures that serve to coordinate the actions of individuals. Exactly the point. The author is trying to identify what is an institution. Is this an institution? This is an institution. Let us adopt a broad definition. And this is the adopted definition that he agrees on, that it helps to serve coordinate actions of individuals. So D is the main point of the passage, and D would be the right answer. Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. I'm Sayali Kal. In this particular video, we'll be taking a look at an RC passage which is on humans' ability to understand music, or musicking as the author says. So let's take a look at the passage. We'll go paragraph by paragraph and then take a look at the questions. Humans today make music. Think beyond all the qualifications that might trail after this bold statement, that only certain humans make music, that extensive training is involved, and that many societies distinguish musical specialists from non-musicians, that in today's societies most listen to music rather than making, and so forth. So the author says that, listen, humans can make music. Now you can argue back saying that I can't make music, you can't make music, only 1 in 10 people can make music. You can say all of that. But the fundamental thing is that humans can make music. The point is that it is true that humans can make music. They have the ability to make music. You can argue that, okay, you can quibble about it, that only a subset of people can do it, or this is a trained musician, that is not a trained musician. But the basic fact is that humans can make music. These qualifications, however, whatever their local merit, are moot in the face of the overarching truth that making music, considered from a cognitive and psychological vantage, is the province of all those who perceive and experience what is made. We are almost all of us musicians. Everyone who can entrain, not necessarily dance to a beat, who can recognize a repeated tune, not necessarily sing it, who can distinguish one instrument or a singing voice from another. I will often use an antique word recently revived to name this broader musical experience. Humans are musicking creatures. So basically he's arguing that, okay, you can quibble that or not all humans make music, but the author says that all humans are musicians. And why does he say that? He says that from a cognitive and psychological perspective, anybody who can understand music, who can understand a beat, who can follow a beat, who can understand a tune, who can distinguish from one instrument to other, who can distinguish from one voice to other, they are basically musical, they have musical abilities. You might not be able to sing, you might not be able to dance, but every human has that musical ability as such. It is a basic human ability that everybody has. If you quibble about it that, okay, we are not at the, everybody can't make music or dance to music, all of that, the author is saying, no. If I consider these to be the set of definitions of what it is to be a musician, this everybody has. And basically he says that instead of calling ourselves musicians, because that term has different connotations in current culture, I'll use the antiquated term musicking. Musicking basically refers to a basic ability to understand music, and he says that all humans have this basic ability to understand music. So the point of the first paragraph is that humans are musicking creatures, that is, have a basic ability to understand music. Basic musical ability is present. Musical ability is universal. Now let us take a look at the next paragraph. The set of capacities that enables musicking is a principal marker of modern humanity. There is nothing polemical in this assertion except a certain insistence, which will figure often in what follows, that musicking be included in our thinking about fundamental human commonalities. So the author says that, okay, our ability to understand music, or our ability to do musicking, is essentially shows that it is a marker of modern humanity. What do we mean by marker of modern humanity? When you see humans as a species, what is a characteristic of modern humans? What is the characteristic of us as modern humans as compared to prehistoric humans? And that is essentially our ability to understand music. Musicking is one of the characteristics of modern humans as such. And the author basically says that this is not a controversial opinion as such, other than the fact that if you say that it should be included in what we consider as a fundamental human commonality, basically saying that it is something that is common to all humans all over the world. Once you think of it in that way, essentially it's something that is very basic and universal to humans as such. Capacities involved in musicking are many and take shape in complicated ways arising from innate dispositions. Many of these capacities overlap in non-musical ones, though a few may be distinct and dedicated to musical perception and production. In the area of overlap, linguistic capacities seem to be particularly important, and humans are in principle language makers in addition to music makers, speaking creatures as much as musicking creatures. So he's basically saying that humans, essentially musicking is a marker of modern humanity. A human commonality. Human commonality basically means universal to all modern humans. And the capacities overlap with other like markers of humanity, other capacities that have developed in humans, but they are not necessarily completely overlapping. Like something that makes us distinctly human as compared to animals is our ability to speak. So we are speaking animals, but also one of the characteristic things that makes us different from others are we are also musicking animals. So essentially universal to all humans, we are speaking as well as musicking creatures. Speaking and musicking, characteristic of modern humanity. Humans are symbol makers, a feature tightly bound up with language, not so tightly with music. The species Cassera, dubbed Homo symbolicus, cannot help but tangle musicking in webs of symbolic thought and expressions, habitually making it a component of behavioral complexes that form such expressions. But in fundamental terms, music is neither language-like nor symbol-like, and from these differences come the many clues to its ancient emergence as such. So we are symbol makers also, like we are speaking creatures, like we are musicking creatures, we are also symbol makers, and you can tangle it up in our ability to write, in our ability to speak, and in our ability to form symbols as such. But musicking is a separate capacity, separate from our ability to write symbols or thinking symbols, and separate from our speaking ability as such. So essentially musicking overlaps with other abilities but is a separate ability as such. Okay, and why is this important? Why is this important that it is a separate ability? Because then you can actually trace when it evolved. Because if it was something that evolved along with speech and symbols, then you'll have to trace it with speech and symbols. But if it is a separate capacity, you have to think of when it evolved, and you can separately identify when it evolved as such. Time of emergence can be checked as such. If musicking is a primary shared trait of modern humans, then to describe its emergence must be to detail the coalescing of that modernity. This took place, archaeologists are clear, over a very long duration, at least 50,000 years ago or so. More likely something closer to 200,000, depending in part on what that coalescence is taken to comprise. If we look back at 20,000 years, a small portion of this long period, we reach the lives of humans whose musical capabilities were probably little different from our own. As we look farther back, we reach horizons where the similarity can no longer hold. Perhaps 40,000 years ago, perhaps 70,000 years ago, perhaps 100,000. But we never cross a line where before which all the cognitive capacities recruited in modern musicking abruptly disappear. Unless we embrace the incredible notion that musicking sprang forth in full-blown glory, its emergence will have to be tracked in a gradualist terms across a long period. So essentially, why is the author interested in tracking the emergence of musicking? Because if you track the emergence of musicking, and if you say musicking is a trait of modern humanity, so when musicking emerged, that is when you would say, okay, this is the start of modern humanity. So his significance of emergence of musicking, and what he realizes about significance of emergence of musicking, there is no such one point at which you suddenly see musicking ability. You see that it had gradually developed. At 20,000 years ago, it was pretty similar to us. but it was there in some form or the other even 40,000 years ago, 70,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, in some smaller form as such. It is not that it suddenly burst forth, it gradually grew as such, and it gradually emerged. This ability gradually emerged over time. This is one general feature of history of music's emergence. The history was at once socio-cultural and biological. The capacities recruited in musicking are many. So describing its emergence involves following several or many separate strands. So basically the author is saying that there are several factors in the emergence of musicking, and you have to track several different strands to understand the emergence of musicking. So what is being basically discussed over here? How musicking is essentially a marker or a characteristic of modern humanity, how it is a distinct capability, distinct from speaking and symbolism. It is a distinct marker of how we became the modern humans that we are. It's a modern capacity, and all humans universally have this capacity. And if we understand how it emerged, we would be able to understand how the modern human emerged as such. So that is basically what is being discussed, musicking as a capability, musicking as a marker of modern humanity. So now that we understand all of that, let's take a look at which one of the following sets of terms best serves as keywords to the passage. Musicking, cognitive psychology, antique, symbol makers, modernity. Humans' capacities, language, symbols, modernity. Humans' musicking, linguistic capacity, symbol making, modern humanity. Humans' psychological vantage, musicking, consider, emergence. So there are two ways in which I actually solve questions like this. Things that absolutely must be there and that should not be there, and this is basically elimination. So once I find out what absolutely must be there, I then say that okay, this absolutely must be there, and then I eliminate things by saying that this is definitely not important at all. So what is one term that absolutely must be there? Musicking is one term which absolutely must be there because it is the central term that is being discussed throughout the passage. It absolutely must be there as such. I would even say that it is a marker for modern humanity is also an important aspect of what is discussed in the passage. So these two I would say are must. This especially is an absolute must. If it is not there, we can directly eliminate the option. Apart from that, I'll go through the options and say that okay, this is not really an important term, and then we can find out okay, this is not really a correct option. So let's take a look at the option. First option, musicking is there. Cognitive psychology is there. Cognitive psychology is discussed in terms of like from a cognitive and psychological viewpoint. It was everybody experiences that, it is universal in nature is what is being discussed. So this is not exactly an important keyword as such in the passage, so I can say that this is the wrong option. Antique is also not this. He says that this is an antique term, but the term is important, not the fact that it is antique as such. So again an incorrect this. Symbol makers is important. It talks about how symbol making is also a characteristic, but music making is separate from it. So I would say it is an important this. Modernity is also correct. Modernity or modern humanity are both acceptable. But because of these two options, I would say this is the incorrect one. Humans, capacities, language, symbols, modernity. The most important term musicking is missing, so I can directly eliminate this. Humans, musicking, linguistic capacities, symbol making, modern humanity. Both are there. Symbol making is also important. Linguistic capacities, the comparison with linguistic capacities and symbol making capacities are there as part of the passage, so they are important. And humans or human ability or how musicking is universal to humans is also there. So every single term over here is important. There are no extraneous terms, so I would say this is the right option. Human psychological vantage. Psychological vantage is also wrong because psychological vantage is given just to say that how it is basically mentioned just to say that this musicking ability is universal in humans. So again, it is not something which is primarily a keyword or a point of focus as such. Musicking is there. Cassirer again is not true. Cassirer is basically what Homo symbolicus was called, and it was just a not at all a keyword or a focal point in the passage, so can be eliminated. Emergence of music, not music but musicking as a musical ability as such. So this is also incorrect, but these two are clearly incorrect, so option D is definitely incorrect. C would be the right answer. So let's take a look at the second question. Think beyond all the qualifications that might trail after this bold statement. So what is a bold statement? A statement which is basically plainly made without any explanation or giving any kind of details as to as such. So basically it says humans today make music, which is like a Captain Obvious statement, that there's no explanation. What is he trying to say? So that is basically a bold statement because it's a obvious statement without any explanation or what the author is trying to say through it. So he basically says that if you say, just take this basic statement which is true, you can say that not all humans make music, or musical ability is different among different people. Some people are specifically called musicians and others are non-musicians. You can put all such qualifications, but essentially all humans make music is universally true. That is the implication that he is making through that particular line. So in the context of the passage, what is the author trying to communicate in this quoted extract? A bold statement is one that is trailed by a series of qualifying clarifications and caveats. That is not what a bold statement is. And in this case, this bold statement is trailed by a series of qualifying clarifications. But in general, basically a bold statement is one with no explanation. And in this case, the author says that if you ignore the caveat, this statement is still true. So A is incorrect. A bold statement is one that requires no qualification to infer its meaning. No, a bold statement is one which has is a self-evident statement with no explanation. So this is not that it requires no qualifications. In this particular case, you can have qualifications, but the author is saying despite the qualifications, the statement is still true if you take it at a broader level of what musical ability is as. Although there may be caveats and other considerations, the statement is essentially true. This is exactly what the author is saying, that this statement, this plain statement is essentially true. You can say that not all humans make music, some people are musicians, others are non-musicians, but this statement is essentially true because when you say that ability to make music is ability to follow and understand music, then all have musical ability. So this statement is essentially true despite how you might quibble about it, but this statement is essentially true. Thinking beyond the qualifications allows us to give free rein to musical expressions. Not at all what the point is. He's not asking us to think beyond the qualifications. He's saying that if you ignore those qualifications and the caveats, this statement is true. So C is the right answer. Based on the passage, which of one of the following statements is a valid argument about the emergence of music or musicking? So let us take a look at the options. We have to find out a valid argument about the emergence of the musicking ability. Anyone who can perceive and experience music must be considered capable of musicking. It's not anybody who can perceive music. He gives an example. We are almost all of us musicians. Everyone who can entrain, not necessarily dance to a beat, who can recognize a repeated tune, not necessarily sing it, who can distinguish one instrument or a singing voice from another. So basically he gives a list of things, but just perceive music is not one of them, because I would assume that even animals can perceive music. So it is not really, perceiving music would not be, it would be too broad a definition of what is musicking. So this is not correct as per what the passage considers musicking ability among humans, because it considers it a mark of humanity. Although musicking is not language-like, it shares the quality of being a form of expression. He says that it is a form of expression. He does not say it is not language-like. In fact, he says that many the capacity for musicking overlaps considerably with the capacity for language as such. So he does not say that it is not language-like. So this is also incorrect. 20,000 years ago, human musical capacities were not very different from what they are today. This is true because the author says that if you go back 20,000 years ago, a small portion of this long period, we reach the lives of humans whose musical capacities were probably little different from our own. So their musical capabilities were pretty much close to our musical capabilities as such. So this is true as per the passage. So I'd say this is a valid argument about the emergence of musicking. Option D is all musical work is located in the overlap between linguistic capacity and music production. The author in fact says that much is located in this overlap, but much actually means that not all is located. So D is definitely not a valid argument. So C is the right answer. Which one of the following statements, if true, would weaken the author's claim that humans are musicking creatures? So he's basically saying that it is a mark of modern humanity, it is universal nature, it is the mark of what makes us modern humans. And if you trace the evolution of emergence of musicking, you trace the emergence of modern humanity. This is his main argument. So we have to see something that attacks this argument as such. Non-musical capacities are a far greater consequence to human survival than the capacity for music. Human survival is not what the author is considering. The author is considering what makes us, what is a characteristic of modern humanity, not what is a characteristic of modern humanity's survival. So A is completely tangential to the point the author is making. From a cognitive and psychological vantage, musicking arises from unconscious dispositions, not conscious ones. Even if they are unconscious dispositions, they are still human dispositions. They are still human abilities. So, as long as they are human abilities and universal human abilities, his point is not invalidated as such. So, B also is not weakening his point. As musicking is neither language-like nor symbol-like, it is much older form of expression. That is actually what the author says, that it is something that if you trace back, it is its emergence is not exactly overlapping with either language or symbols, but it is something which is completely entirely different in its emergence. And if you find out that point of emergence, you would find out the emergence of modern humanity. So this is actually congruent with what he is saying. So it's not weakening what he is saying at all. Musical capacities are primarily socio-cultural, which explains the wide diversity of musical forms. Now, if this is the case that musical capacity is socio-cultural, that means musical capacity is not unique. It is not universal. It is not something which is similar to what there was 20,000 years ago. Because 20,000 years ago, our social and cultural abilities were very clearly different. So when he says that, okay, musical capacity is musicking, or the musical capacity is an identity of or a marker of humanity, modern humanity, that is clearly wrong, because musical capacity is essentially developed through socio-cultural factors that are present today, not that were there like thousands of years back. So D would completely weaken his point, because then musicking is no longer universal, it is no longer something that emerged with the start of modern humanity, it is not a marker of modern humanity at all. So D basically weakens his point the most, so D would be the right answer.
Google search Cracku CAT formulas PDF, click on the first link, you will get a list of topics for CAT, click on one of the topics, download the PDF to get a list of formulas for the topic.
Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. I am Sayali Kal. In this particular para-jumble question, we have a paragraph which tells you about the evolution of the word cheer and how it impacts not only, it essentially is not just a word explaining how you feel, but it has impact on the self itself. So let us take a look at the sentences. The trajectory of cheerfulness through the self is linked to the history of the word cheer, which comes from an old French meaning face. The translations of the Bible into vernacular languages expanded the noun cheer into the more abstract cheerfulness, something that circulates as an emotion and social quality, defining the self and a moral community. When you take on a cheerful expression, no matter what the state of your soul, your cheerfulness moves into the self. The interior of the self is changed by the power of cheer. The people in medieval Canterbury tales have a piteous or a sober cheer. Cheer is an expression and a body part lying at the intersection of emotions and physiognomy. So the fact that people in Canterbury tales have a piteous or a sober cheer means what? It means that they have a piteous or a sober face. Essentially, cheer in this particular case refers to the face, and it also is an expression, it is a body part, it is something that is both something that is felt as well as something that is part of your physiognomy as such, which essentially is expanding that it comes from the body, it is felt on the inside, it starts off from your face but it is felt on the inside, and the whole part of like the cheerfulness from like the face or the word cheer, which refers the face to what you feel, that link is being traced. So essentially first let us introduce a topic about the take on a cheerful expression, that the cheerful expression itself has a power. It is not something that It's not just something on your face, but it moves inside of you to your soul. It changed, your interior of yourself is changed by the power of the cheer. So basically, first, before we tell why the piteous and sober cheer were used, we have to say what cheer meant initially. And cheer meant that it was face. So 1 and 4 are essentially a pair, which explain how the word cheer then became cheerful. So 3 tells you this cheerful, starts off telling you about cheerfulness, and essentially talks about the power of the cheer. So, and from cheerful, to understand the cheerfulness, you have to understand cheer. It began by like when you see that it started with the old French word meaning cheer, which means face, and then that is why people in Canterbury Tales said, okay, he has a sober cheer or a piteous cheer. And this was then translated, when you're translating the Bible, the noun cheer was changed into cheerfulness, which is an abstract quality as such. So this should come after 1-4, and 1-4 basically tell you about the start of cheerfulness, which was started as the word cheer, which meant face, and 2 tells that when you were making vernacular translations of the Bible, this cheer transformed into cheerfulness. So you first introduce cheerfulness, and 1-4-2 takes a look at the trajectory of from cheer to cheerfulness as such. So the order of the sentences should be 3-1-4-2. Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. In this particular video, we'll be taking a look at a para-completion question. So the sentence given is, most were first-time users of a tablet and a digital app. So it is giving you the methodology of certain something that was done. It is telling you how it was used or who it was used by. So let us take a look at the paragraph and understand where that sentence can go. Aage Badhe's USP lies in the ethnographic research that constituted the foundation of its development process. Customizations based on learning directly from potential users were critical to making this self-paced app suitable for both a literate and non-literate audience. The user interface caters to a Hindi-speaking audience who have minimal to no experience in digital services and devices. The content and functionality of the app are suitable for a wide audience. This includes youth preparing for an independent role in life or a student ready to create a strong foundation of financial management early in her life. Household members desirous of improving their family's financial strength to reach their aspirations can also benefit. We piloted Aage Badhe in early 2021 with over 400 women from rural areas. The digital solution generated a large amount of interest in the communities. So essentially, if you see the statement says that its USP lies in the fact that we did proper research of who is going to use it, and we incorporated that in the development process. This tells you how, okay, they were made sure that, well, they were like essentially customizations were based on making sure that it was self-paced app for both who are literate and non-literate. So you learn from the fact that your app is going to be used by both literate and non-literate. It was catering to a Hindi-speaking audience who had minimal to no experience. So you had to make an app which would be working with somebody who had no experience of digital services. It should be suitable for a wide audience. It should be suitable for this person, this person, this person as such. So till here, we see from here to here, it is giving you an reasoning for this particular statement. This is a statement made, and these are essentially facts which basically back up this given statement. So essentially, if you consider 1 and 2 blanks, this does not work in either of the 1 and 2 blanks, because that blank basically, the first statement basically tells you that you're talking about how the development process occurred. The development process occurred keeping in mind these people. This is not about the usage of the app yet. It is only talking about the development process, and at the time of development process, they thought who is going to be using the app, and they basically considered these would be the people, and they made the app accordingly. This is talking about first time users, which is much later on. Till now, we are still in about how the development occurred. This includes youth, and this includes this. Over here, you are basically giving a list of all the people who could potentially be the users of this app. Basically, like when you make an app, you make these use cases of how somebody is going to use it, the user persona, and different user personas are given about who would use the app. So till now, you are only discussing the process behind the development of the app. Then you have a pilot program. And once you have the pilot program, only then will you have the first time users. Till now, you would be only in the development process, people who are giving you feedback. but now you would have first time users. So the only place where the description of the first time users is apt is option 4. Only there can you actually have first time users, because till here you are only discussing the development process. So the correct option is option D. Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. I'm Sayali Kal. In this particular video, we'll be discussing the paragraph which is about how we framed the choice of eating healthy. We made it as an individual choice as such, rather than a societal level consideration. So let us take a look at the sentences. Women may prioritize cooking because they feel they alone are responsible for mediating a toxic and unhealthy food system. Food is commonly framed through the lens of individual choice. You can choose to eat healthy. This is particularly so in a neoliberal context where the state has transferred the responsibility for food onto individual consumers. The individualized framing of choice appeals to a popular desire to experience agency, but draws away from the structural obstacles that stratify individual food choices. So the first topic, that food is now framed as an individual choice, something that you can choose to eat healthy. So this topic is introduced in 2. So 2 should be the first sentence, because it introduces the topic that is being considered. So the author says that this individual framing tells you that, okay, you are in power, but essentially it also obfuscates the fact that there are systemic issues with being able to make healthy choices. Not everyone is able to make healthy choices. There are structural obstacles to that. So when you say you have to choose to be healthy, it kind of ignores the fact that some people don't have the ability to eat healthy choices, especially the poor. For the poor, healthy food might be out of reach as such. So this individualized framing helps us feel that, okay, we are in control and we are in power. But the fact is that this individualized framing has a downside also. It makes what is not an individual choice look like an individual choice. And the author says that this is particularly true in the neoliberal context, where basically the state says, this is not my power, this is not my problem, I should not have any say in what you eat, this is your responsibility as such. So this individualized framing is especially the case in neoliberal societies. So 4 and 3 basically should be a pair, which tells you that what is the problem that is there. That there is this individualized framing of the choice to eat healthy, and more so in neoliberal context where the state feels it has no right to decide what anybody eats. But the problem is that there are structural problems or structural obstacles to eating healthy. Now, the responsibility of the food is on individual consumers, especially women. Women feel that it is their responsibility to cook healthy food because there's a toxic system, and if you have to take care of your family, it is your responsibility as a woman to make the right choices as such. So 1 basically 3 talks about this responsibility being transferred to individual consumers, and 1 talks about who most keenly feels this responsibility to navigate the food system. So 1 should be the last sentence. So the order of the sentences should be 2, 4, 3, 1. Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. I'm Sayali Kal. In this particular video, we'll be discussing a jumble about how the issues of environmental collapse require not just technological solutions but broader political solutions as such. So let us take a look at the sentences. From chemical pollutants in the environment to the damming of rivers to invasive species transported through global trade and travel, every environmental issue is different and there is no single tech solution that can solve this crisis. Discourse on the threat of environmental collapse revolves around cutting down emissions, but biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse are caused by myriad and diverse reasons. This would require legislation that recognizes the rights of future generations and other species, that allows the judiciary to uphold a much higher standard of environmental protection than currently possible. Clearly, our environmental crisis requires large political solutions, not minor technological ones. So instead of focusing on infinite growth, we could consider a path of stable state economies while preserving markets and healthy competition. So the author is talking about how, for preventing a lot of discussion about the environmental collapse is that we have to cut down emissions. But environmental collapse can happen for a myriad reasons, and those reasons are given over here: chemical pollutants, invasive species, damming of rivers, etc. So 2 says that there are myriad reasons that could cause ecosystem collapse, and 1 lists out the other reasons other than emissions as such. So 2, 1 necessarily form a pair. 1 also says that no tech solution can solve this, and clearly we need a large political solutions. So no single tech solutions would solve these problems, but instead We need large political solutions. So the next sentence should be 4. 4 says that we need large political solutions and not technological solutions, so that instead of focusing on this, we would need, we should consider path for stable state economies while preserving markets and healthy competition. And how would we achieve that? That is mentioned in 3. We would require legislation, we would require judicial power to actually make sure that this works. So the 2-1 tell you a problem, 4-3 give you a potential solution for it. So the order of the sentences should be 2-1, 4-3. Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. I'm Sayali Kal. In this particular video, we'll be taking a look at a para-summary question. So let's first take a look at the paragraph. There's a common idea that museum artworks are somehow timeless objects available to admire for generations to come. But many are objects of decay. Even the most venerable old master paintings don't escape. Pigments discolor, varnishes crack, canvases bob. This challenging fact of art world life is down to something that sounds more like a thread from a morality tale, inherent vice. Damien Hirst's iconic shark floating in a tank titled The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living is a work that put a spotlight on inherent vice. When he made it in 1991, Hirst got himself in a pickle by not using the right kind of pickle to preserve the giant fish. The result was that the shark began to decompose quite quickly, its preserving liquid clouding, the skin wrinkling, and an unpleasant smell wafting from the tank. So what is being described over here? The basic fact that people think that artworks will last forever, that you have your Mona Lisa, the Mona Lisa will last forever. But that is not true. Even the works of the old masters will not last forever. The pigments will discolor, the varnishes will crack, the canvases will warp. So all artwork has a lifetime as such. They are going to eventually get destroyed. And this eventual degeneration of artwork is called by the term inherent vice. And the first time when people actually realized, okay, this is a concept where artworks can degenerate, artworks have a limited lifetime as such, was with the artwork of Damien Hirst called The Physical Impossibility. Okay, his artwork was basically, he put a actual dead shark in a tank and he put a preserving liquid around it. But that liquid was not right, the preserving technique was not right, and therefore the shark started decomposing, and it started decomposing badly as such. So that was the incident basically which led everybody to start thinking about the fact that all artwork will decompose eventually. So essentially that was a trigger for people realizing and recognizing the fact that artworks can degenerate and they have a limited life as such. They do not have an infinite life. Okay, so that is basically the point. Artworks do not have an infinite life. This concept is called as inherent vice, and that is basically the topic of that first topic was first highlighted by Damien Hirst's artwork as such. So let's take a look at the options. Museums are left with the moral responsibility of restoring and preserving the artworks, since artists cannot preserve their works beyond their life. The paragraph does not talk about moral responsibility at all. It just speaks about the fact that this is a problem, this is something that is going to occur, this is that artworks have a limited lifetime is something that you have to recognize as such. So moral responsibility, whose moral responsibility is not even a topic touched by the paragraph. Museums have to guard timeless art treasures from intrinsic defects such as deterioration, paint, polish and canvas. It's not an intrinsic defect. It's basically the fact that even if you are like making a perfect painting, even like the old masters, all of this inherently will have a end date. It's not that they are defective. They just have an end date. Everything has an end date as such. So it's not that there's an intrinsic defect. Mostly it is not. It is basically the point is also missing, that all artwork will have an end date. All artwork have they are not timeless. They have a lifetime as such. So that particular point is missing. So option B also can be eliminated. The role of museums has evolved to ensure that artworks are preserved forever in addition to guarding and displaying them. Firstly, the author is saying they can't be preserved forever. There's inherent vice is a real thing and they can't be preserved forever. Moreover, the role of the museums is not discussed at all in this particular paragraph. So option C can be eliminated. Artworks may not last forever. They may deteriorate with time, and the challenge is to slow down their degeneration. This is the whole point. that these are not, the fact that they will not last forever is the main point of the paragraph, that they have a lifetime, they have a limited lifetime, they are not timeless objects. And this concept is called as inherent vice. So only option D basically even touches at the main point, which is that artworks have a limited lifetime, they are not timeless objects. So option D comes the closest to being the summary for this passage. So option D is the right answer. Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. In this particular video, we'll be discussing a para-summary question. First, we'll take a look at the paragraph. Today, many of the debates about behavioral control in the age of big data echo Cold War era anxieties about brainwashing, insidious manipulation, and depression in the technological society. In his book Psychopolitics, Han warns of the sophisticated use of targeted online content, enabling influence to take place on a pre-reflexive level. On our current trajectory, freedom will prove to have been merely an interlude. The fear is that the digital age has not liberated us but exposed us by offering up our private lives to machine learning algorithms that can process masses of personal and behavioral data. In a world of influencers and digital entrepreneurs, it's not easy to imagine the resurgence of a culture engendered through disconnect and disaffiliation, but concerns over the threat of online targeting, polarization, and big data have inspired recent polemics about the need to rediscover solitude and disconnect. So basically, the author is saying that if you see the current way in which people are talking about behavioral control, it harks back to the era of like the Cold War. In the Cold War, there were concerns that people are being brainwashed, they are being mind controlled, etc. And those same concerns are occurring today. Now, essentially, what the new what has generated the new fear? Basically, targeted online content. Basically, that because big tech has given up so much of our data to machine learning algorithms, that we can be easily manipulated and mind controlled by these algorithms, by the information that is being fed to us. And basically, that is the fear that we will be controlled. Big data's use of these algorithms, the fear is that we will be manipulated and mind controlled. And essentially, there is now a rise in belief that, okay, we need to disconnect, disaffiliate, etc. So there is a rising wave of concern over us, like humans being targeted, humans being behavior being controlled via big tech and via these algorithms. And secondly, the new movement to try to disengage, to try to disaffiliate, and try to like move away from all of this world of influencers and digital marketers as such. There are people who are consciously trying to disconnect. So now that we understand the fear and the response, let us take a look at the option which captures both of these aspects. Rather than freeing us, digital technologies enslaving us by collecting personal information and influencing our online behavior. The author says that this is one of the fears that has emerged. The author is not saying that digital technology is actually enslaving us. He does not make this assertion. He's saying that there is a lot of fear around that this is what is happening, is that on our current this freedom will be proved to be mostly an interlude. So basically, people are believing this, essentially he's saying. He's not saying that this is the case, that freedom is going to be an interlude. He's not making this. The author is saying that there are a lot of debates around it. People are believing that as such, not that this is true. So A distorts what is given in the paragraph. With big data making personal information freely available, the debate on the nature of freedom and the need for privacy has resurfaced. The essential crux is that there is now a lot of debate about what is going to happen, how we are being manipulated, and how we need to disconnect. The debate is what the author is talking about. He's not saying this is going to happen, that we are going to be brainwashed. He's not making those claims. He's just saying the fear has come back again, and there are a lot of debates about what is going to happen. So only B actually captures what is the crux of the paragraph. The role of technology in influencing public behavior is reminiscent of the manner in which behavior was manipulated during the Cold War. There was fear that this was happening. There is fear that this is happening, but there is no confirmation that that actually happened. The author says that if you listen to it, if you listen to the fear of being manipulated by algorithms, that fear is similar to the fear that people had in the Cold War era of being manipulated. So fears are being discussed and not real manipulation as such. So this is distorted. The notion of freedom and privacy is at stake in a world where artificial intelligence is capable of influencing behavior through data gathered online. The author does not make this claim that our privacy and freedom is at stake. The author says that this is what people are feeling. This is the new movement or this is the new fear that people are feeling as such. So D also does not capture that. Only B captures the fact that there's a lot of debate of what this means. There is no clear-cut idea that this is going to be terrible for us. The author does not say this is going to be terrible for us. He says that the emergence of these kind of technologies has brought about a lot of fear, and that fear was similar to what we had seen in the Cold War era. So he's not saying that this is for certain that these algorithms are going to control us. Only B actually captures that point. So B is the right answer. Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. I'm Sayali Kal. In this particular video, we'll be taking a look at a para-summary question. So let us first take a look at the paragraph. Several of the world's earliest cities were organized along egalitarian lines. In some regions, urban populations governed themselves for centuries without any indication of the temples and palaces that would later emerge. In others, temples and palaces never emerged at all. And there is simply no evidence of a class of administrators or any other sort of ruling stratum. It would seem that the mere fact of urban life does not necessarily imply a particular form of political organization, and never did. Far from resigning us to inequality, the picture that is now emerging of humanity's past may open up our eyes to egalitarian possibilities where we otherwise would have never considered. So the author is basically saying that if you consider urban life, certain some of the earliest urban cities did not have like the political establishments like temples and kings as such. They didn't have that kind of this. They were egalitarian societies. Some of them did not have it for a long time. Some of them never had like political establishments. Essentially, they remained egalitarian throughout their history. So why is the author quoting this example? He is basically quoting the example to say that we now know that there were egalitarian urban life existed without the political establishment that we now take for granted. We now take for granted that there should be some temple who is telling people what to do. There should be some king who is telling people what to do, or at least some kind of organization in the form of administrators or some kind of a ruling class. None of that existed, and still the urban life society worked as well. In certain cases, it never came like that kind of structure of political organization, ruled versus the ruling. That organization never came in many cities as such, and that basically should be something that we should open our eyes, that it is not necessary that every urban city should have a ruling class as such. That is what the author is trying to say. So let us take a look at the options now. The lack of hierarchical administration in ancient cities can be deduced by the absence of religious and regal structures such as temple and palaces. So the author is not saying that all ancient cities did not have this. The author is saying several of them did not have it. Initially, some of them had it later on. And the fact that it was not, this is not just the fact that this hierarchical administration was absent, but that should essentially tell us that it is not needed. That is the main point that the author is making, that if the city existed without a hierarchical administration, that means that hierarchical administration is not needed. So A is missing the main point that is made by the paragraph. Contrary to our assumption that urban settlements have always involved hierarchical politics and administrative structures, ancient cities were not organized this way. So the author does not say all ancient cities. Certain ancient cities were not organized this way, and several of them got that kind of structure later on, but were not initially organized that way. So this is partially true, but it's essentially contrary to our assumption that all urban settlements have always involved. Some of them did not involve. So because of the fact that all and some are being distorted over here, I'd say B is not a good summary. And it's not an assumption, this is what we always thought to be true, but new research or new developments are showing that this was not true as such. The emergence of a class of administrators and ruling stratum transformed the egalitarian urban life of ancient cities to hierarchical civic organizations of today. This is missing, this is incorrect. It's not that the emergence changed the society. The author is basically trying to say the urban life existed without a ruling class, without a hierarchical organization, which means that it can exist and we should try to go towards that. Essentially, the author does not want a hierarchical he doesn't want a ruling class. So he's basically saying that look, those kind of societies existed earlier. So it means that they can exist today also. It should open our eyes that we do not need a ruling class. So this misses the key point. So option C is also not the right summary. We now have evidence in support of the existence of an egalitarian urban life in some ancient cities where political and civic organization was far less hierarchical, which is exactly the point that for some cities there was no ruling class, there were no temples or kings, etc. There were no administrators, no evidence of administrators or any sort of ruling stratum. So essentially that is now available to us, and essentially we should now realize that it is not needed. Those ruling classes are essentially not needed at all. So our only option D is actually a true summary that new perspective has been found, new information has been understood, and only D is actually capturing that point. So D is the right option. Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. I'm Sayali Kal. In front of us is a para-completion question, which is where we have to find out the right place to put the given sentence. This is an easier question because there is a big clue in the sentence about where it should be placed. So let's take a look at the sentence. This was years in the making but fast-tracked during the pandemic when people started to be more mindful about their food, he explained. So if somebody explained, he explained, it has to be after when somebody has been introduced. So let us take a look at the paragraph. For millennia, ghee has been a venerated staple of the subcontinental diet, but it fell out of favor a few decades ago when saturated fats were largely considered to be unhealthy. Nobody has been introduced till now, so I can't put he explained. So one can be eliminated. But more recently, as the thinking around saturated fats is shifting globally, Indians are finding their own way back to this ingredient that is so integral to their cuisine. Still nobody introduced, so we can't put the sentence here. He explained does not make sense over here because we have to introduce a speaker, and a speaker has not been introduced, so 1 and 2 are eliminated. For Karmakar, a renewed interest in ghee is emblematic of a return to basics movement of India. So 3 can be a potential place. This movement is also part of the overall trend towards slow food. In keeping with the movement's philosophy, ghee can be produced locally, even at home, and has inextricable cultural ties. At a basic level, ghee is a type of a clarified butter believed to have originated in India as a way to preserve butter from going rancid in a hot climate. So basically, the right place to basically put the sentence he explained, people are being more mindful of this, is at 3, because he is being introduced, that is this renewed interest is emblematic of return to basics, and this moment was always in the making, but because of the pandemic it got fast tracked. So 3 would be where he would introduce how this movement essentially took off. And then you have the more details of the movement given, how it is the overall trend towards slow food, the movement's philosophy, and at the basic level, what is ghee as such. So this is giving you an explainer on what the movement is, but the fact that this movement was years in the making, but it started or took off in the pandemic has to come before that. So 3 is the right place for putting the given sentence. So the correct option is option C.